The benefit of being cast in a role that you didn't see yourself as always is that it opens that up for you. That you're like, you're not the type you thought, so open that up for yourself. But on top of that, this idea of what Dorothy versus witch is that an ingenue is what women should aspire to be. Now, an ingenue is young and beautiful and innocent, and a witch is old and craggy and evil. And you don't want that. What you want is the young, beautiful, innocent thing. Well, you can't be young and beautiful and innocent forever. And so what will happen to you when you stop being that? Are you no longer relevant as a human being just because you're no longer a pretty young girl who's innocent? And so I think that the fact that I even wanted Dorothy is the narrative that people have to fight against. There's so many layers to that experience that I've used as like a parable for my career. One, that Dorothy's out of work at 20 and the witch works till she dies. But, two is that why did I want Dorothy? Why didn't I want this other role? I ended up really discovering things about myself and about my own talent in playing something that I thought was ugly and wrong. And I think that little girls everywhere should look to the witches.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Miriam Shor is an actor. At that very brief moment when shaking hands was a no-no, but there wasn't yet a prohibition on meeting with people, I sat down with her in New York City to talk about the work.
In Lost Girls, you play this woman, Lorraine. I honestly didn't think we were going to talk a lot about this because I thought it was a small role. I wanted to see it though. But I was really, really blown away by what you were doing here, how you inhabited this woman.
Well, thank you.
And in a short amount of time on screen.
Yeah, no, it's not a big
not,
one,
yeah. But so alive. And I wanted to just start with this. I wanted to know if you could just take me through the process and of initially inhabiting her and if it's different than you usually do with other characters.
So Lorraine was different, a different process for me because Lorraine is a real person. And there's a couple things you can do, right, as an actor with that, is you can contact the real person and you can get to know them. I had Bob Kolker's book, Lost Girls, in which he delves into the lives of all the people involved in this. Beautifully written, meticulously researched. You can tell he cares about these women, he cares about their voices. You don't usually have that. You don't have, there's not a great deal of footage of Lorraine, like there is of Mary Gilbert, which is the role that Amy Ryan plays.
Right.
So I had several different ways I could approach it. And one of the things I was very mindful about was while I wanted to, the most important thing in the world to me always is to be as truthful as possible within the realm of the story I'm telling as an actor, but in particular this, because it is a real story, and this woman's daughter was murdered.
Right.
And I'm a mother, but I'm human, and I can understand that kind of pain goes to a place I don't know. I hope to never know, but I was so mindful that I didn't want to invade her privacy and ask something of her. I felt that the world had asked so much of her already and treated her so poorly that I didn't want to burden her with that.
Yeah.
So I chose to do the research based on the book, based on what limited footage I could find, and then talk to the director, Liz Garbus, and trust her. I felt that she was a trustworthy person. I know how much she cared and how much research she did on this. I know that she knew Mary Gilbert personally. I know, and I wanted the vision that she had for this film and the message of this film, the story, to be hers, and I wanted to facilitate that. And I trusted that if I wasn't getting at what she wanted, A, I wouldn't be there because I auditioned for it, and B, she would tell me, because she was very communicative. We had rehearsals with just the group of women, which is so helpful.
Yeah.
Because it's fast what we have to do, especially on an independent film, but even in a Netflix film, it's fast what you have to do. You have to move on. You have to get your day. So there's a ticking clock, which you have to ignore as an actor. So I didn't talk to Lorraine. I would like to talk to Lorraine now that it's over, to tell her, to include her in the process in that way, and not ask anything of her, But, there's an accent I use in there.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, and it's pretty broad, the accent. I talked to Liz about it. I have friends and family who live in Maine, and that's not how they talk at all. But there are people in Maine who do. So I did research about the different accents, and I said, this is what I've come up with. This is what it sounds. In the snippets I've heard of Lorraine, this is what it sounds like. Does this work for you? She was like, I love it. That's what I want. And so, it's very collaborative. To me, I feel like I think some directors want you to come with everything fully formed and they just step back and let you do your thing. And I'm a very inquisitive person, and I'm a very collaborative person, and I always like to ask the director if this is working for their vision, because I think that they're steering the ship. I wouldn't want to do anything that would take them off course.
But Liz Garbus never directed a feature. We worried, because that she's very successful as a documentary.
Right. Well, but she knows how to direct a feature. She's directed shorter films, and this was in her wheelhouse. This was something she came to as a filmmaker. She wasn't only a documentarian in terms of how she studied and how she looked at the world and what she wanted. And I knew that. And I got to know her. She's an incredibly intelligent person, and her films are remarkable.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge fan of her films.
Yeah.
I mean, What Happened to Miss Simone is one of my all-time favorite films. She put it really well in various interviews we've been to, where she said, she's not uncomfortable with the truth as a documentarian, with the truth and the way that people are truthful in actual life. She's very familiar with that. And I knew that because of that, that's what she would want to see in her narrative feature. And that's so real,
That's so cool. That's so cool, yeah.
So I trusted that she would recognize when something felt false. Because you want, when you're taking the viewer on this journey, you want them to believe you.
Yes.
The whole time,
Yes. Yes. So I'm going to say something. It's going to sound like just a compliment that you're going to want to, because you're like me. I haven't seen you in other interviews. You like to be self-deprecating.
Yes,
okay?
That's where I live. I live on the avenue of self-deprecation and severe, crippling insecurity.
But I really want you to look at this objectively and just hear this. Every moment you're on screen in this movie, I was on the verge of tears. Oh. Was there something you were working with? Like, you were talking about her pain. Well, is that something you actually somehow implement in somehow?
Well, so, in Bob Kolker's book, he talks about this journey that Lorraine has gone on. She was an addict. She dealt with alcoholism. Her kids were taken from her by the state. She also gave custody to her mother of her daughter, and then wasn't so sure about that. Had to make very difficult choices. Wasn't served well by society either in the problems that she faced as a woman who had very little economic resources. She says, I had to sell my TV just to come down from Maine to be here.
Right.
So someone who has had to go through all that and then is continuing to fight to find her daughter and is continuing to add her voice to something isn't necessarily going to apologize. But I do feel like within her, towards her own daughter, there's this feeling of, I may have failed. I mean, look, as soon as you become a parent, the truth is you walk around thinking, I may have failed my kid, That's just the reality of having children.
Yeah.
And you may have, you may have.
The odds
and
are.
Probably have on some level at some point.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that I was familiar with because that's just how we are. There's so many painful things that happened to her. So I feel like in a way there's something about her that's a warrior. In a way there's something about her that has been deeply, deeply hurt continually. And how do you walk through the world when that has happened? I can only imagine how difficult it is for her because I haven't had the same hardships as her. So, you just try to think, well, how would that affect my body?
Yeah.
How would that affect how I sit? How would that affect when I meet a new person?
Yeah.
How I present myself? What in me can I feel like, I get that. That's how I can understand why you would come to it, why you might need to laugh something off that is incredibly painful. You know what I mean? Because it makes you feel like you control it on some level. And all of these things, by the way, are not over-intellectualized in the moment.
Yeah,
so you try to think of all of these things ahead of time
and let them go, right?
And let them go because films can see when someone's planning something. You see someone working something out in their brain.
That's right.
So you don't want that to be. No one's constantly working things out.
Yeah.
But that's got to affect how you walk through the world.
Yes.
And also she's talking about her daughter that she lost in so many ways.
Yes.
And that is inevitably just the subject matter. There's a sadness there that I don't think I could have not shown because of how I felt as me.
Right.
And then anger that I, also felt as me. And I was like, well, look, if I feel these things, Lorraine's got to be feeling these a million times more. So it's okay if they're a part of my performance, since I can't get rid of them anyway. I've got to use them somehow. It's so nice having a bunch of really good actors around you, because then you can just watch them and react to what they're doing, and you don't have to be conscious of yourself as much.
Yes, I guess that helps, huh?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, doing a scene with Amy Ryan, she's so grounded in whatever the reality of that moment is, and so truthful that you're just looking at her and feeling like, okay, me too,
Yes.
And then you feel a lot of responsibility to these women to honor their truth and honor their loved ones. So you try to drop every pretense you have.
Can we talk philosophically about...
Always. Hello, I'll live there, yes.
I've been talking to actors lately about this whole idea that acting is a very strange thing. If you do it really good, the performer disappears, and it's just the person you're playing there, and then people don't appreciate the work so much because they're just lost in...
People shouldn't see your work.
Right. And I feel
hate
like
when
with
I see
this,
someone's work. That drives me nuts.
Well, I feel like with this role, like I could have easily just not even thought about you as an actor in this movie, in this thing at all. I would just believe that you're the person.
That's
if
really nice to hear.
It really is true. But do actors think about this? Do actors think, I have to peek behind the curtain here so people can see my performance?
Well, no. I mean, first of all, yes, actors. Unfortunately, actors do sometimes do that.
I know they do that, but
sometimes you think, wow, I really see that person's work. And look, I don't want to disparage other people's performances because everybody's doing the best they can, Yeah. But there are times when they get rewarded for that.
That's what I'm saying.
And I'm
That's
like,
what I'm talking about.
You're like, wow, that work is hard. That's amazing. It is amazing, but it wouldn't be more amazing if you didn't even think about the actor and you were just following the story.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that about my performance. I think that's doable as an actor. Every actor's different, but it sometimes irks me when a director doesn't respect that you can get to that place and kind of tries to create an environment without consulting you of like, we're going to just make this as real as possible, and I'm going to plunk you in it, and I'm going to hope you feel whatever the thing is, fear, anger, because of what I'm doing, instead of letting me also participate. If you're asking someone who thinks of acting as like a craft, as something that they have worked their lives on, you might get something great from them if you let them be a part of the process. I think it's all collaborative. I like to be collaborative. I like to know what's happening.
Yes.
There are other actors who don't want to know what's happening, and they just want to be as truthful as they can in the moment. Right. So, the hard thing as directors, like then finding out which kind of actor you're dealing with. Yeah. But I mean, you can ask them, I think. I mean, they're just people you can converse with.
I mean, you can kind of figure it out if you just have like a little meeting and have like a little rehearsal.
Exactly. Rehearsals. This is why rehearsal is helpful.
Yes.
Because you can then parse through, like, what is it you're going to need to get there? I need you to get here. How can we get there? What helps, Now,
are you saying that because you are from the theater and it was in you from the beginning, like rehearsal, or would you be saying that now if you didn't have that theater experience, just because you know that even in films, rehearsal is important?
I think either. I think I would come to it eventually, just because rehearsal can be so helpful. There's times when you don't want to over-rehearse things. Yeah. Comedy is helpful. You don't want to over-rehearse comedy because sometimes you're like, oh, we're losing that surprise. But I still think a rehearsal is helpful, Mm-hmm. And I've worked with different people who I've worked with even theater directors who sort of want to experiment with that. And I'm cool experimenting too, as long as you let me in on the experiment. Mm-hmm. That's where I am. I like to be thought of as a collaborator. Mm-hmm. And so far I've been lucky because I feel like directors I've worked with have honored that, or been, and I also have a big mouth and we'll just have the agency to be like, what's going on?
Yes.
What do you want here? Because I can help you get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like that, like the actors maybe are afraid to speak up a lot. Is that true? In the beginning?
I think everybody, sometimes it depends on what we're filming, but sometimes there's like a delicacy, right?
Yes.
So we feel like, ooh, we don't want the souffle to sink. We don't want the house of cards to fall, right? And I understand that. We're all trying to get at something that is actually really difficult to define and is delicate. And so we don't want to mess with it. But sometimes, to me, things can be too delicate because I like to be a part of the process. But other people don't want to engage that cerebral part of themselves at all. They want it to be very visceral. So, it's good to find that out. But I tend to speak up, but that's also because I'm a little older now. I certainly didn't when I was younger, or I maybe did, but that was just out of like kind of joyful ignorance. And then there's a period of time where you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't talk.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel like we'll just waste a lot of time if I don't ask this question. I'm going to be thinking about the whole time instead of doing my job.
Right. And then you get to monitor how they react to that. And then, if they react a certain way, that could be bad. But if they react in an open way, that helps everything. Helps the work, it helps everything. It makes you feel like a collaborator. Then it continues the whole process of it being better.
And you have to make art with other people unless you're like a visual artist who works alone in your studio forever. But eventually people are involved because you want them to look at it. So that's involving people. There's a risk because people can be crazy. People can be assholes. People can be all kinds of things. So you're taking a risk when you involve people. But for the most part, I think most people just want to do the best they can and will try to do whatever they can to get there.
Can we talk about one moment in Younger that I really, really loved?
Sure.
Okay? See if you could remember this. David Wayne. I love that.
I love David Wayne. I've known David Wayne for a long time.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, like we were sort of
maybe this was why those scenes were so
kiddos
good.
Coming up.
He played a very overly conscious man.
Yeah, male feminist.
Male feminist, okay? Which is just
a
already such fodder for comedy already.
Right.
The moment I want to talk about is when he decides not to go home with you.
Right, I'm in the cab.
He puts you in the cab. Your face when the cab goes off is what I want to talk about.
It's interesting. So I've been an actor for a while, and a face is part of what you use to tell your story, to tell the truth of whoever you're being. And I remember doing a play when I was in college, and someone coming up to me afterwards and being like, "Oh my God, those prosthetics were incredible." Was it like spirit gum on your face? And I was like, "No, that was my face." But thanks for that. In other words, I'm just mugging the hell out of my face. So that's good to know.
Yeah.
And part of comedy, comes from maybe a slight exaggeration in the human condition, right?
Yes.
And the tragedy of our human condition.
Yes.
So, I had a person ask me like, "So do you plan your faces?" And I was like, "Oh, good God, do I look like I'm planning my faces? Because that would be the biggest fail for me as an actor. Like, I don't think about my face when I'm doing things, I hope, Yes. But at the same time, you're communicating what's going on inside externally, but you hopefully aren't thinking about it. It's just happening.
Right.
Yeah. I do know that. It's this moment where she, I guess like in the stage direction, like she blanches, she looks nonplussed. There's expressions.
It's saying so much though in that moment. It solidified the entire joke of this whole concept.
Yeah, like of course this is what happens at the end of the night with a fucking meltdown.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But see, the woman who asked that, I get the idea of that, of asking that, and it could sound like she means like, wow, you must really plan them or something like that. But it is a giant, because that it is so rich. That face was so rich. It did not seem like it was inorganic in any way.
Yeah,
that's why it's a wonder.
I had to come back to that comment a few times because I was like, you know what? I don't think that person was doing me a disservice.
Yeah.
I actually think what that person was saying was like, look, I'm not an actor. This isn't what I don't live in this world. I don't know this world. Are you in control of this art form in any way.
Yeah, right.
You know, which as opposed to like you mug the shit out of your roles.
Which is a great compliment.
Which is so like I chose to take it as a compliment.
Yeah.
The idea is that you just feel your feelings very acutely, and then the comedy comes from the situation you're feeling those feelings in. You know, it's also fun when you play with some. It's play. I have kids, and kids play pretend.
Yes.
Brilliantly all the time.
Yes.
And they love it because it's so freaking fun.
Yeah.
And so I watch my kids play pretend. They are committed.
Yeah, committed.
100% to whatever
And if
weird
you're
ass
not,
world.
if you're not, they get on you.
Oh my God, no. No, believe me, I commit too when I'm playing them. They don't really want me so much involved in it, but they're like, you're good, not great, so we're going to go with someone else. Thanks, we went another way for this role in our play pretend. But because that's where the fun comes from. Like, that's where you get all the fun, is when you're like, fully believe you're in it. So, you know.
And he was a good partner there.
He fully commits too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he plays. It's fun. Yeah. And you should have fun. I mean, I really believe when you're doing comedy, you should be having fun, because that's actually what puts it over to the audience. That's what, there's that extra special sauce, and that's when you guys are having a good time.
Yes.
Not to the point where you drop the truth of it. Right. You don't, it's a fine line. It's actually, that's why comedy is difficult. Because you want to be as truthful as possible, but you also want to have a blast. You want to convey so many things. So it can trip you up, you know. And then, you know, people have opinions watching it. Some people like, some people don't. It hits them differently too, because each person's their own individual. So you can't control that. You just got to try to tell the truth and have as much fun as possible.
Right. Then you started directing younger. You directed a couple episodes, right?
Yeah.
What did you learn from directing?
Yeah, a lot. So I learned to not take things personally, which, you know, actors, I don't know if you know this, filmmaker, but actors can be insecure. Artists can be insecure.
Interesting.
You might not have come across any insecure actors, but there are a few. And there are some actors who don't need it, but most actors do need to be told they're on the right track, or they're anywhere from they're on the right track to they're the best actor you've ever seen in their entire lives. So anywhere in that spectrum, actors like to be told those things, but not bullshitted, because you know. But I learned to let go of that a little bit, because when I was directing, you're juggling 80,000 balls while putting together a puzzle, while solving a story problem.
You're saying, I'm sorry, but I need to make clarify that. You mean you let that go as an actor, toward directors? Okay.
Toward directors.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? It's not necessarily the director's job to make me feel better about each take. Yeah. You know, like and that's actually kind of a big lesson, you know. If you can see it from if you can step back and be like, we're putting together a giant puzzle that needs to make sense. Yeah. And I'm one part of it, but I'm not the only part of it. So it really helped me ego-wise kind of get out of the way and realize that this person has other things on their mind than me. Yeah. So I mean, that is a huge thing as an actor, because ego can really get in your way, and it can get in the director's way. It can get in everyone's way. Yeah, it can be a big pain in the ass. So try to drop that. Yeah. As an actor, it was helpful after I directed to do it, because I could see, like, I was like, oh, it's not about me, man. You know, and if it is, they will let me know. I will know if it's about me.
But did you have to? So I guess you said it. You had to stroke egos in different capacities.
Yeah, you do.
In different.
You do. I also believe it is helpful to tell an actor that they're on the right track. Yeah. So that they feel, so they don't spend any spinning out time. Right. You know, they don't spend time on their chair after that scene when you moved on to the next scene, just spinning in their own minds about, I'm on the right. Because that takes them into a really unproductive place. Right. And that's not going to help anybody, and it's not going to help them. It's not going to help you. Right. You know, that said, still you can still see an actor kind of going to a place where they start to get confused, and then they start to berate themselves internally, and they're starting to not be able to get to the place you need them to get to and they want to get to. Yeah. And how do you help that person? And I ran into those challenges even as someone who I felt pretty confident talking to actors, you know, because I know Right. When I was directing younger, I know those people really well.
Right.
I know those characters better than anybody.
And you've acted for so many years.
And so I had a language with them that was
Yeah.
fantastic. It was a really good way to start directing because I knew I had that. But even within that, you're like, oh, okay, how do I can see she's not quite getting what I'm saying, and that's on me, you know? So I've got to get there. I've got to try for clarity, you know? And then you go back to the directors who've been helpful to you. You're like, well, how did that person do it? I love how that person talks. But then everybody's different. There's some actors that are like, ugh, couldn't stand how that director talks. You're like, wait, that's my favorite one. You're in the same scene. So, you know, everybody's different.
Right.
But it really was helpful. Being an actor helped me when I was directing, and being a director helped me when I was acting.
Right.
You know, if I can see long term where I'm going, I can drop everything and let go and be really present. But again, that's me. Not every actor needs to know long term. Some there's like, long term gets in my way. Just tell me what's happening now.
And I'm sure that there are a small percentage of actors who actually stewing in their chair, spinning, as you say, in their chair is actually good for them because their insecurity fuels some kind of process, right?
Sure. That's for some people. That's actually how they get to where they need to get to.
Yeah.
And for some people, it just gets in their way.
Yeah,
you
for
know?
most, I imagine. Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to feel like you're doing a bad job. And there's no actor who I think does their best work when they feel like they're doing their worst work.
Right.
You know, I mean, there might be a few, but I think it really helps to feel like you're at least on the right track, so you don't have to worry about that. You know, which is when being a director is, you know, you're not coddling people. You're just like, you would tell the person setting up the lighting, like, yes, that's the lighting I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Or like your DP, like, yes, that's the shot, you know.
Yeah.
You can tell the actor, like, yes, that's what we're going for, you know.
Yeah.
Well done.
Right.
I think it actually is, I found it helpful to express that to everybody.
Yeah.
To anybody doing anything to help this work out for me.
It's like a human need we have.
Well, just to be grateful and to acknowledge that, like, look, the work you're doing is making me look fantastic.
Right.
And I just want to acknowledge that it's actually your work.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I don't know. I found that to be helpful for,
right.
you know, the crew, too.
Right.
Well, I mean, they're working their asses off, and nobody at the end of it goes, oh my God, you're the best grip I have ever, you know. And they work their fucking asses off, so I think it's fair.
I heard you tell a story that in school you wanted the role of Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
And they gave you the Wicked Witch.
Yeah.
And your summary of the story, you said something like, and then that became the story of my career. You joked and said that. Now, here's my question, okay? Because you're a Dorothy type. If you had gotten the role of Dorothy, would you have a whole assessment of your trajectory? Yeah. And then proceed in that way. Are things like this important when we're young?
Yeah, I think...
And sizing up our type.
Yeah. I mean, look, type was a huge thing when I was coming up. It's type. What's your type? What's your type? What's your type? And my point as an actor is I don't want to have a type.
Yeah.
I want to literally play anything that speaks to me. And so don't type me out of that role because you think I'm a type. And I'll tell you, the benefit of being cast in a role that you didn't see yourself as always is that it opens that up for you.
Yes.
That you're like, you're not the type you thought, so open that up for yourself. But on top of that, this idea of what a Dorothy versus witch is that an ingenue is what women should aspire to be.
Yeah.
Now, an ingenue is young and beautiful and innocent, and a witch is old and craggy and evil.
Right.
And you don't want that. What you want is the young, beautiful, innocent thing. Well, you can't be young and beautiful and innocent forever. And so what will happen to you when you stop being that? Are you no longer relevant as a human being just because you're no longer a pretty young girl who's innocent? And so I think that the fact that I even wanted Dorothy is the narrative that people have to fight against, which is like, we have the film about Dorothy, that's fine, but really isn't the witch a more interesting character because we have so many biases against her, and why do we have that? You know, and so it's really, there's so many layers to that experience that I've used as like a parable for my career. One, that Dorothy's out of work at 20 and the witch works till she dies. But, you know, two is that why did I want Dorothy? Why didn't I want this other role?
Yes.
You know, she's the lead, she gets the pretty songs. So that's true.
Yeah.
But, you know, I ended up really discovering things about myself and about my own talent in playing something that I thought was ugly and wrong. And I think that little girls everywhere should look to the witches. And if I can end with any sentence, please let it be, little girls everywhere should look to the witches.
And so it will be.
And she cackles. Cue cackling as we fade to black.
Miriam Shor, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of IFP, the Independent Filmmaker Project. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.